after going undefeated in the regular season and getting left out of the college football playoff in 2023, Florida State fell completely off the wagon in 2024. Where are they in their attempt to get back to the college football playoff in 2025 and beyond? We're going to talk about it next on the College Huddle. And joining us here on the College Huddle today is Jesse from Plant the Spear. He is by far one of the best Florida State podcasters and content creators out there. My man, Jesse, welcome to the College Huddle.
Oh, man, I appreciate that. Thanks for having me on. Excited to talk about Florida State. Excited to talk about anything that is forward going because we just want to put last year in the rearview mirror. But there's a lot of change and a lot of excitement that has made its way back into this program. So, man, I'm pumped to talk about it with you.
Yeah. Before we get into all of that and we dive into 2025, I think it is important to understand how we got here.
Oh, for sure.
2023 was a return to the preeminence that was Florida State that, Jesse, you and I grew up with. Okay. Before I brought you on, I was taking a trip down memory lane. I was going through Florida State year by year by year, and I started reliving the 90s in my childhood and all the greatness that was Florida State under Bobby Bowden. 93, 1999, the national championship years, man. And the time they wiped the field with Ohio State, my team I root for, man. And we get here to the Jimbo Fisher years, and you have 2013, so it's not like under Jimbo things fell apart, okay? But and then you had Mike Norvell getting the team in 2023 on the precedence of getting back to the college football playoff, and you get left out because of an injury, man, and then the wheels fall off. I want you to explain to me, someone who's not paying attention to Florida State every single day, knows all the ins and outs. What did that decision by the playoff committee in 2023, how much did that change what happened moving forward and the outcome that was the disaster last season?
Yeah, man, these are the types of things that are really hard to gauge. But I think now that we have hindsight, I think the cracks that this led to and the foundation that led to what we saw in 2024 went a lot farther than a lot of us expected it to. Initially, I think we thought, okay, well, they're going to circle the wagons and do all this stuff and come back in 2024. But I think what happened was something just fundamentally was wrong within Mike Norvell's kind of mental aspect of running this program, right? I mean, they were pretty much assuming they were going to make it. They had already had guys planning to go out on recruiting trips. They did not expect to have to try and put everything back together all at one time. And then I think the other problem is, we circled that moment a lot, and it deserves to be circled because that was, I mean, let's be honest, it's something that will live in the history of this program forever. Because I do say, on a kind of a side note, a hill that I will die on forever. If Jordan Travis doesn't get hurt, I think Florida State probably wins a national championship in 2023. I think without Jordan Travis, I think they earned the right, obviously, to go in there and compete in the playoffs. Obviously, the team, that year with the best defense won, and Florida State had one of the best defenses in the country. So I think you could have allowed them that opportunity. You see what some of these guys are doing, Jared Verse in the NFL and Braden Fisk. That was a legitimate team. But I think the other thing on top of that was the things that led into that Orange Bowl too, all the opt-outs, when that game was really a dismantling by Georgia, to us. And I think those things really just dug a hole that the program was not able to get themselves out of. One of the things where I think it's kind of like a good and bad for Florida State was the success that happened in 2023 was great. And I give the prior staff that we had credit for assembling that team and credit for doing what they did with the talent that they had. But we didn't get the benefit of hindsight then, obviously, but if you have that benefit now, and I think you look back, there were some changes that should have been made on this coaching staff prior to that 23 season, somewhere maybe even prior to 2022 when they went 10-3. But I think the feeling was, hey, we're winning, things are looking good. And then all of a sudden they're not. And I think a big part of that too has been recruiting. It has not been good enough. It's not at least been up to Florida State's standard out of the high school level. They've done great in the portal, but they really haven't kind of built their foundation out of the high school recruiting like they should have to be able to compete for championships. And then really when you get into 2024, when you kind of wrap up 2023 and you look at what happened to the next year, really, I think what happened more than anything was the staff got a little bit, because they had the success. And yes, the end of the season that happened the way it did really hurt the program. But I think there was a little bit of laziness with the prior staff, and maybe even a little bit of, I hate to say arrogance, but arrogance among the staff that, okay, we're just going to go load up on these transfers, the backups from Georgia, the backups from Alabama. Before they identified Jared Verse on a film when they were scouting Syracuse when he played at Albany. So they were finding these needles in haystacks, these diamonds in the rough. But then they went and took a bunch of backups. And even Nick Saban said it on game day one day. He's like, look, there's a reason these guys are backups. There's a reason they're in the portal. And then, DJU was someone we had that really didn't work out. Marvin Jones Jr. was another one we had that didn't work out. So you bring in all these guys, and you really didn't hit on any of them. And so it was just kind of a cluster of events that led to this really terrible offensive line play. And so hopefully the thought process is now you've got rid of that staff. You've cleaned house. 70% of this staff is new going into 2025. Around 70% of the starting 22 is new going into 2025. You're looking at about 14 to 16 starters will be new. And so as bad as that was, this is a new team, and I think, Eric, you can speak to this too, where in the modern era of college football, you don't have to be defined by what happened last year, because you can turn over a roster so fast. You talk about like an Indiana or an Arizona State, where you can kind of flip a light switch on a roster from year to year. So that's what we're kind of hoping happens going into 2025, that you have enough new that the old can just stay in the old. Because, and I do want to say this, like, I fully admit, as bad as what I think that event scarred the program, it should have never led to 2-10. That should have never happened. Not at a place like Florida State. It just shouldn't have.
Okay, so that being said, as we kind of take the rearview mirror and take it off the car.
Please. And back over it, run it over, and then go.
not look at it again. As someone who's sitting in the passenger seat of this program currently, and you have Mike Norvell in the driver's seat, I need to ask you this question, okay? Do you believe he is capable? He is the man who can right the ship and get this program heading in the right direction and get it back to the college football playoff? Meaning this, if we are in early on in this rebuild and this kind of, get going in the right direction again, step one, if you will, where's your confidence level in him?
Man, that's a hard question, right? And I will say that I personally, I am a Mike Norvell fan, right? And I want him to work out because it's what's best for the school. I still believe he's a good coach. I mean, he inherited a somewhat successful program there at Memphis when he took over. So you could say that he carried that on, but he still led them to the Cotton Bowl. Then he comes to Florida State. He takes over an absolute kind of dumpster fire with the remnants of what happened under Willie Taggart, the last year under Jimbo. And he flips and he takes over, in the COVID year where you couldn't go out and get those recruiting ties. He had really no ties in the state of Florida. So he did a very commendable job to getting this program from where it was to the 23-4 run in 22 and 23. So I think the thing is, you've seen him do it before. And that's what gives me confidence in Mike Norvell. You've never really seen him have a 2-10 type of season, with the exception of the COVID season when he first got here, which, that kind of, I give him grace for that. I throw that out the window. But I think this is going to be such a big prove it year for Mike Norvell in which direction we're going to go. Because the thing we've talked about on our show before is it's just so hard to know who the real Mike Norvell is, because we haven't even had like a middle of the road bowl season. 7-8 wins. It's been either terrible, 3-9, or whatever it was in 2023, 3-6, I think, 3-9, 5-7, then 10 wins, then 13 wins, then down to 2. We just, it's hard to call. And so there is the side of me where I do have the reservations that maybe he's not the guy, right? I mean, you got 3 out of 5 seasons have been losing seasons. If we're being honest here, the first loss to FCS school in program history, the first loss to Duke in program history. He's put some black eyes on this program, but he's also done a pretty good job of getting it back relevant in the national picture had 2024 not have happened. So I think there's two things that are important when you ask this. One is the program itself, a place like Florida State that's in such a prime recruiting ground that has the name that it does, the cachet that it does of the brand. It can be flipped like that. It's a program that we've seen it. It went from 3-9 or whatever to 13-1. So it's a program that can be flipped. And then point two, I think, is the new staff will help Mike Norvell ultimately reach his goal. When he put that first staff together, some of those guys weren't his first choice. He didn't make a lot of changes early on. I don't feel like there was a lot of just really experienced guys that he could trust to just kind of hand the keys to things like this year with the offense. He can give that to Gus Malzahn, who's an experienced guy who I think he can trust to manage that aspect without him having to look over that while he tries and puts, spot fires out here and there around the program. So I think CEO Mike Norvell will be a lot better for the program. I think the coaching staff he has built around him, Tony White is a hire that I love. I'm sure you can probably speak to that a little bit as a Big Ten guy. But I think they put together a much better staff. But there's also is Gus Malzahn's system still going to be relevant? How is this going to look? Do we still have the talent to make that work? So I'm still a believer in Mike Norvell, but I just have to be cautiously optimistic until I see it. I want it to work. I'm just not sure that it's going to. And one of the things I will say this is I'm hoping Gus Malzahn as a guy who, yes, he may have passed his prime, right? But he was with a national championship program at Auburn. He's went head to head with Nick Saban and Kirby Smart in living rooms. I'm hoping his experience at the highest level will rub off on Mike Norvell a little bit and help them kind of figure out how to get things back in order. And so far, we're seeing it pay off on the recruiting trail. I mean, Florida State has been on fire in the month of June, 12 commitments up to a top 10 class. And I think that's how you get back, right? But it all depends on this year. I think you have to go out and win a minimum. I don't think they're going to fire him anything below like missing a bowl. But I think for the belief to come back into this program and the belief to come back in Mike Norvell, I think you need to win 8 games.
Okay, we'll get to the schedule and see if we can find 8 wins on there for you. Okay, so as this rebuild, as this return to glory starts to go down this path that you have laid out for us, Jesse, is the coaching hires the most critical aspect of that in your opinion, or is there something else that needs to be accomplished in order for you to say, yes, we're heading in the right direction, and yes, there is a bright future. It can be seen at the end of 2025.
I do think the coaching hires are point number one. I really do. And Florida State has some other things going. Obviously, the stadium just got remodeled. They got a football only facility that's going to be online later this year. So the facilities are getting upgraded there. Florida State has already committed, they got plenty of money for the new house settlement and things like that are going on. They've been making some good NIL deals and things like that. So I think they can compete in that area. Are they, maybe top 5 in that area? Probably not, but they're better than a lot of teams they lost to last year, right? And so a lot of that I think does fall onto coaching. And I think the point of the coaching is one, it has to be you have to see the better recruiting, which we are seeing now. Now, obviously, it matters where you're at on signing day, not in the summer. So if they can continue to recruit like they have been, I think that's a really big point of getting Florida State back to where it is, because obviously you want to use the portal, right? But places like a Georgia and Ohio State, the championship level teams, the Notre Dame, yes, they do use the portal, but they don't build their foundation out of it. And Florida State's kind of been doing that. So I think building that high school recruiting is the first arm. And then the success on the field has to follow. And I think this staff is more proven. The last staff was a lot of G5 guys, guys who were assistants maybe at some smaller programs. Now you're getting a guy from Nebraska. You're getting a guy from, who's been on Auburn on a national championship staff. So you have a higher level staff. And the development, honestly, Eric, it really wasn't there under the last staff. The offensive line development was pretty poor. The wide receiver development was awful. And that's really 90% of what happened last year was terrible offensive line play. It's kind of all of it, terrible offensive line play combined with receivers who had the highest drop rate in the country and an inaccurate quarterback. So I think Herb Hand taking over the offensive line, you've got a guy who's been an offensive line coach here at Texas, at I think Penn State. So he's been at these big programs. you fix that offensive line, you get this offense going again. And I think Florida State, if they win 8 or 9 games and they sign a top 10 class this year, I think you're going to start to see things speed up really quickly in that rebuild.
What is the fan base's patience level with this?
It's thinner than thin can be right now.
Okay.
I would honestly say there's a portion of the fan base that Mike Norvell could win 10 games and they still want him fired, if we're being honest. There's a lot of people that just don't believe in him. And really, when you talk about the belief amongst the fan base, I think there's a little bit of a misunderstanding by most of the fans that buyout that Mike Norvell got with the contract restructure is a real thing. That's why some people say, oh, 7-5, I think he's out. And I'm like, man, I just don't think so. That's a lot of money. You're talking about $60-70 million. Plus you have to buy out the brand new staff you just brought in if you don't promote somebody and bring in a new coach and a new staff. I think that's a real thing. So you want to keep him probably as long as you can to make it financially make sense. But I also think the patience are very thin, and Florida State is not going to tolerate this very long. Because at the end of the day, Eric, as you know, college football, when you look back to our season last year, you miss a bowl, so you miss that revenue. You have half-empty stadium a lot of times. The booster donations go down. So, yes, that is a big cost, but how much can you afford to let the program squander like it did last year? So, it's thin. That seat is hot, man. It is legitimately hot. But I think that buyout is like sitting on a bag of ice on a hot stove. It's only going to last so long, but it's going to buy you a little bit extra time.
My next question is going to seem unrelated, but it's not. And I'll explain after you answer the question. What do Florida State fans think of Jimbo Fisher?
Yeah, oh man, it depends on who you ask, right? And I may catch some heat for this. I'm not a hater of Jimbo, but I hate how Jimbo left the program. I think you have honestly about 50% or so that can't stand him at all, period. And I think some of us do romance that memory, right? And for me, to the short of it is because of Jimbo, I was able to go to Pasadena in 2014, January of 2014, and watch us win the national championship. I will forever be grateful for that because that's something I got to do in my life. And obviously, 7 years later, when I was in the stadium watching us lose to Jacksonville State, that success is never guaranteed. And so, me and Michael on our show, my co-host, we've joked before that like, hey, maybe if you were going to bring in an offensive coordinator that kind of ran an outdated system, maybe it should have been Jimbo instead of Gus. And I think, we've actually talked about this before, maybe not publicly because I'll probably get flamed for this, but we've said before, like, say things don't work out with Mike and you have to go back to the drawing board. And who do you go after? Would it be Jimbo or the field that you can realistically get? We're not talking Nick Saban out of retirement. Man, I almost have to say Jimbo would be one of the first calls you'd have to make. You have to. He didn't work out at Texas A&M, but he's led you there before. And he can still recruit. I just think he needs to have a good staff around him. But I'm not a hater for Jimbo, but a lot of people in this fan base really, really don't like him because of the way he kind of quit on us in 2017.
Yeah, I was curious. He's not doing anything right now, so
No,
I was curious what
you
would.
know, it's crazy. I'm surprised West Virginia didn't make a pass at him because he's from West Virginia and he would love to be back there. I'm honestly surprised they didn't call him.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a good point. I'm just going to throw another name out at you and just get your take, and then we'll stop talking coaches because obviously you want Norvell
Yeah,
to succeed.
right.
But we're here, and so when you're driving down this road, every now and then you pass by some very nice looking cars, and so you
Yeah.
you gotta What about Urban Meyer?
I think hell would have to freeze over before Florida State would make.
Really?
I really do. I really do. But the funny thing about that is, when me and Michael were talking off air about this whole conversation one day, we're like, man, you can't not call him. Like he's won national championships at multiple schools. He's done it at a school in your state. I always tell people, look, I'm not your guidance counselor. I'm not your guardian angel. I'm not here to judge what you do right and wrong off the field. So I think you got to call him. But I think, yeah, again, I don't think there's a chance that's ever going to happen. But you never know. You never know, man.
Shelly Meyer loves the state of Florida. She lets everybody know that. So I'm just saying.
That's funny.
All right, enough with that. Okay. Yeah, let's go ahead and I'm going to pull open the schedule now. and we're gonna dissect this schedule, and let's see if we can find 8 or 9 wins on this bad boy for you. Okay. Uh, Gonna start off game number one, man, against Bama.
That's a
They've
tough one.
got just a little bit. Now you do get them at home. That's gonna be
Yeah.
interesting. Week one.
That's
Uh,
not what we needed coming out of the gate coming off of 2025 or 2024. Not at all.
but I'll say this, shoot your shot, and if you come away with a huge upset, holy smokes,
Yeah.
you're talking, no one's giving you a chance to win this game.
No.
I
Mm-mm.
mean, nobody. And so if you're going to be an underdog, that's the kind of underdog you want to be right there.
Yeah.
All the expectations are on them. You get them at home. The crowd's going to be, ready to go.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, this is going to be an interesting one. So obviously, we're going to chalk this up as an L. But
Yeah.
just saying, as underdogs go for Florida State, this is what
Yeah.
you want.
Yeah, and I would say with that game, I think what we're hoping for is obviously getting them at home. Stadium should be back to around 70,000, so it should be full capacity. And I think our hope is that Alabama is breaking in a new quarterback. That's something I
Hmm.
think that is big to watch. Milroe was a big part of that offense. Alabama's still a really good team, but we kind of look at the way they were 2-4 outside of Bryant Denny last year. They every game that they didn't rush for over 100 yards, they lost, and Tony White has a really good rush defense. So I'm not predicting us to win that game, but I would also not be surprised by Florida State pulling the upset. But even more than that, I'll say this. I don't think you have to win that game, right? Think back to last
Right.
year with Clemson and Georgia. They got their brakes blown off by Georgia and still made the playoffs, won the conference. I just think you can't get blown out in that game. I think because of the tone it sets for the season, the perception of the program, here we go again. You can't lose that game like 31-7. If you keep it close, 34-27, man, I think you come out of that not happy about a loss, but I think you're like, okay, if we can play Bama like that, we can probably find 8 wins on the schedule.
Yeah, and you could find it. It sounds weird to say because you don't want to find moral victories and things, but
Right.
absolutely, you can find momentum there.
Exactly. Yep.
100%. All right, moving on here. Let's go to East Texas A&M
Yeah.
Lions. I'll be honest, I didn't even know East Texas A&M was a thing, so we're going to
Yeah.
say that's a win.
Yep.
First bye week of the season comes on September 13th. You play a team I know real well because I've done a lot of work there. I live in this state, Kent State. They're one of the worst teams in Division One football. That should be a win. Interesting note. I didn't know if you know this. Not Kent State has 70. Hey guys, if you ever want to go to school where you got a good shot, Kent State is the
That's
place
funny.
to go.
That's
Kent State. We're gonna chalk that up as a dub for you guys as well.
yeah.
So you're 2-1. Friday, September 26th. So you're going on the road for the first time in the ACC. It's going to be a Friday night game at Virginia. This is actually a difficult place to play on the
Yeah.
road at night and on Friday nights. They play quite a few Friday night games there. The
I
Hoos do,
know.
man. That game, interesting game, brother. What do you think of that one, man?
So, yeah, and I will say this, when you look back at the other two games, obviously you want those to be W's. If you lose either one of those, that's a fireable offense. You just cancel the rest of the season and that's it for everybody there. But I do like the fact that you have those two kind of tune-up games and a bye week in between. So I think no matter what happens coming off of Alabama, if you have an emotional win, you get 3 weeks to recover. If you have a bad loss, you get 3 weeks to recover. You get time to figure things out. Now, I really wish that East Texas A&M game was ahead of Alabama as a week 0 game, but that's just not the case. So I think you go in there 2-1 with a little bit of confidence. Virginia is a team that really has struggled recently. I think this is also kind of a maybe a hot seat year for Tony Elliott there in Virginia. We've had a little bit of trouble winning up there. I'm going to be at that game, so hopefully we end that trouble. But we've had some trouble winning up there before. But man, I just think right now Florida State has more talent. I think they have a little bit better coaching. And although it's going to be in Scott Stadium on Friday night, I just think Florida State walks out of there with a win. I think you just have a talent and a coaching edge, and you're coming in with a little bit of a momentum there.
Yeah, we'll have to definitely check out the Plant the Spear and the Cavalier Connection uh, going for that one, man.
Yeah,
Working
we're
together
we're
on
going to
that one.
link up. We're going to get together for the
Yeah,
game, and we're going to do a preview as well on both channels. So excited for that.
perfect. Love it. All right, moving forward here. So after that, October 4th, come
The
back
big one.
home, rivalry game,
Huge.
Miami. Yeah, this is a big one, man. So I kind of feel like the U's kind of got quite a bit of expectations. They want to be a college football playoff team. They have to win this game if they're going to do that.
Yeah, this is a big one, man. This is huge. And so, really, when you talk about Miami, I do like that you get them at home this year. That's big, I think. And I actually, so the way most Florida State fans look at this schedule, right, is you have the two basically guaranteed wins. Then you have the four big ones: Bama, Clemson, Miami, and Florida. And then you kind of have the rest, which we look at, maybe 50-50, some toss ups in there as well. Out of the big four, I think Miami is probably the one I would pick Florida State to win in, because you get them at home. And I'm not as high on Miami as some people are coming into this year. I mean, and I'm not going to take away that Carson Beck's not a good quarterback, because I think he is. I just think when you look at how are they going to be able to flip that defense around, they got a new coordinator coming in this year. Their defense was pretty bad last year. And then you also look at Miami, still, like, they could not get to that ACC championship last year. They still had kind of a 3-loss season or something like that with Cam Ward at quarterback. And Cam Ward, without Cam Ward and a little bit of kind of luck their way with the Cal game and the Virginia Tech game and things like that, that's probably a 6-win team. And Cam Ward ain't coming back. And they've also, the thing with Miami, they lost around 80% of their production last year. They lost Restrepo. They lost 1,000-yard back. They lost a lot at Miami that I don't think people are really taking into account. Now, they have a lot of good pieces there that they've done in the portal, and they've recruited well. They have a good offensive line, should be able to run the ball. But I do think if I had to pick an upset in the big four, it would be Miami. Something just in my gut. Maybe it's because maybe it's the heartburn. I don't like Miami. Maybe that's what it is. But I think Florida State pulls the upset in this one. But I'm going to be honest. I could see it going either way for sure.
Okay. Pitt at Stanford. You get Pitt at home, at Stanford, bye week, Wake at home. So three of the, I guess you could say, uh, mid-level or
Yeah.
ACC lower level teams. Out of those three, are you guys kind of think, yeah, we should win all three of these, or is there one of those where you're kind of like, this is a toss up?
I think Pitt's your trap game.
Okay.
Obviously, coming on the back of Miami, Pitt's always a really solid team. Yes, they started 7-0 last year and then lost the last 6 games, which didn't look good, but they almost beat Clemson. So, I mean, that's a team with Narduzzi there at Pitt that you just never know what you're going to get, man. And they can really contend with everybody. So, I do think Pitt's probably your biggest trap game of the season here. The one that makes me nervous is that trip to Stanford, man. I just something about you see the way Miami kind of struggled against Cal going out west. That game is at 10:30 at night on the East Coast, so 7:30 over there. And this is the Stanford team that they were 3-9 last year. They did pretty terrible, but they also beat Louisville and they beat Syracuse, a couple of really solid teams there. So I don't think you can sleep on any one of these. I wish the bye week honestly came before Stanford instead of after, but this is one I do think Florida State gets all three of these. If you were at Pitt, I'd be pretty worried about that game. I think you can get them at home. And then Wake Forest is in a complete rebuild. New staff, new offensive line, new quarterback, all kinds of new stuff. They hit the portal heavy, but I think getting them at home, I think you take care of it. And I think you get clean through the stretch with 3 wins.
Yeah, I'm with you. At Clemson,
No chance.
you're that high. You're that high on the Tigers. You think that they are? Let me ask you this: as a Florida
Yeah.
State guy, you've got no dog in the fight here, as far as like is Clemson? Are they a national championship caliber team?
Here's the interesting thing with Clemson. Is I think what Clemson benefits from, especially being in the ACC, is they have recruited so well, so much, pretty much above everybody except for Florida State and Miami, that even when they have a down year, the talent gap allows them to do exactly what they did last year. Still sneak into that ACC championship game, still win, and still find their way into the playoffs. And I don't know what they put in the Kool-Aid up there at Clemson, but Dabo can get anyone to turn down anything to come back to play to play another year. Because I was doing some early scouting on them, and it's like, oh, well, this guy's back, and this guy's back, and I know he's a first round projection, but well, he's going to come back too. And it's like, man, and you got Klubnik should have his best year there. I think they will probably be the playoff contender out of the ACC. I think they get that spot, and then depending on the pairing, you really can't doubt Dabo. That's the honest thing, man. Is like I want to say Clemson's, there's cracks in the foundation and they're headed one way, and then they just come up and make the playoffs last year. They got the Penn State DC. I think that's a good addition for them. But then you also see where they, what happened with Georgia last year, and then what happened, and they competed pretty good in the playoffs, but they still came up short. So I don't think it's the Clemson of old, but I think they're still probably one of the top 10 programs this year. Looking at going into the playoffs, I think they'll represent the ACC. For us in this game, it's all about being in Death Valley, man. We have won in Death Valley 2 times in like the last 20 years. And one of those teams was led by Jameis Winston and won the national championship. The other team was led by Jordan Travis and should have got a chance to play in the playoffs. So our 2 best teams in the last 20 years is what it took to win up there. This is probably Clemson's best team they've had in the last probably 5 years or so, I think. And so this is the one that I essentially give us not much of a chance in at all. Now, again, you never know if you can run on them or something like that, but being in Death Valley, I'm not confident in this one at all.
Have you worked with Brian over at Clemson Football Live yet?
I have, and we're actually working on scheduling a show hopefully next week.
One of my
He's a
faves.
he is
You two are fantastic guys.
he's a trip, man. I love working with him.
Yes, indeed. All right, you got Virginia Tech at home. That one will be, I believe, senior day for you guys on
Yeah.
November 15th. And then you're on the road to finish off a ACC play at NC State. Your thoughts on those 2 games?
So I think you get Tech at home. I do think you can beat them there, mostly because Virginia Tech has really struggled under Brent Pry to win outside of Lane Stadium. I have the research; it's somewhere in my notes. I don't have it in front of me right now, but I believe under his tenure, they have maybe 2 Power 4 wins on the road. So they're good at home, obviously with Lane Stadium, but they struggle on the road. And so last time they came to us, that was a pretty good game, but we ended up pulling off late. So I think you get Virginia Tech there in what I think is a do or die year for Brent Pry there at Virginia Tech as well, because that's a program that, they should be competing for championships. And so I would like to see them get back to that. I think you get that one there. Maybe if you were at Lane, which I'm disappointed, man. I want to go to a game in Lane Stadium. That game was actually supposed to be in Blacksburg, and it got moved to Tallahassee. And then the next one there, I think with, you know, NC State, Carter Finley Stadium is what we call the snake pit for Florida State, the house of horrors. I don't know if any other teams have that, where there's just like this one place where it just seems like the mystical magic of college football comes and kicks you in the you know what's because it never
Yeah.
fails. There at Carter Finley, man, we just struggle, and I think we have one win there since 2016, and
Mm.
so I I was surprised to see NC State play like they did last year, and I think they will be better this year. But man, I think Florida State should win that game. I really do. I just worry about it being in Carter Finley Stadium, a place we've really, really struggled to win. Last time we fell 2 points short with Jordan Travis in 2022. But man, I think it's hard because I also don't know what NC State's going to look like this year. I didn't expect that from them last year, but they still made a bowl. But I think Florida State can win that game. I'm just worried about where it's at more than who it's against. So I think Florida State can get a win there.
At Florida, go.
Tough one, man. It's Tate Rodemaker walked into the swamp and won a couple years ago, so it's not impossible to win there. But Florida finished last year as one of the hottest teams in the country, and DJ Lagway has a lot of hype around him. I haven't really seen, you've seen flashes, but you haven't seen a ton of it consistently. Is he going to be that guy? If something happens to Lagway, who do they got behind him? And that's, I think, the big question for Florida. How healthy did they come into that game? They got a tough schedule again this year. But, man, I'm not scared of Florida. I just think going on the road into the swamp, I think they have an edge at quarterback there. I'm probably going to pick us to lose that game. But Florida's a weird team for me, man. And the last thing I'll say about it is, like, I'm not – I get the hype from beating Ole Miss and Georgia or playing Georgia tough, beating Ole Miss, beating LSU, and the way they ended the season. I get all that. I just think Florida's got some questions to answer too. So we'll see how that one goes. But I think they probably get the edge because it's in the swamp.
Interesting. All right. Tough question here to finish it off. Looking at the schedule, 12 games. What do you think is the absolute basement worst case scenario? What is the absolute ceiling best case scenario for Florida State in 2025?
It's funny you asked this because we actually did a whole show talking about this because me and my co-host were talking one day, and I've mentioned this with a lot of Florida State fans where, typically when you come into a season, you probably could say your record would be somewhere within this and this, which is about 2 games. This year, it's honestly a crapshoot, Eric. Who knows? Because when you see a team that can go from 13 wins to 2, anything is in the realm of possibility. When you back it up to 21 to 22, they doubled their win total from 5 up to 10. And so I think there's a lot of things real quick is that Florida State was minus 16 in turnover margin last year. Phil Steele says in his preseason magazine that rarely ever repeats itself. So as long as we can fix that, as long as we can run the ball, as long as we can be a little bit better, I think Florida State does make a drastic turnaround. I think they got to stay healthy. I love some of the pieces they brought in. Squirrel White, you got Deuce Robinson. I think Thomas Castellanos can be a decent quarterback for you. You've brought in some good pieces on the defense. I worry about the depth in some places. So can you stay healthy? But if they stay healthy, I think Florida State could be as high as 9-3. And I also think they could be as low as 5-7. It's just such a wide gap. And for those who may be wondering, I think 5-7 probably does get Mike Norvell fired. I think anything 7-5 or better, he lives to fight another day.
5-7, and you're all talking about Jimbo Fisher and Urban Meyer.
I know. The comment section should be fun on this one. That's for sure.
Oh boy! Hey, that's what we're here for. We're here to have fun, right? Yeah, that's excellent. All right, so let's do some big picture things here real fast. I know that you a year ago, 2 years ago, were really in on all of the ACC talk with Florida State and what's going on and everything like that. It seemed like it's calmed down.
Yeah.
Looks like it's going to be a few years before Clemson and Florida State can revisit whether they're going to re-up and reinvest in this conference, or we're going to go our separate ways and the conference has a slow, painful death at that point. Where would you, Jesse, let's say it's 2030, the year's 2030, we're 5 years down the road. Jesse, you're doing a preseason preview for Florida State in what conference and why?
Oh man, it's tough. I will start by saying I think Florida State came out, and Clemson for that matter, in the positive on this lawsuit, because I think what the settlement, should I say, what the settlement I think gives you is it gives you options down the road if you would like to leave. It also makes it more tenable to stay if you want to stay because of the way they work the media rights deal. And they also have the on-field success initiative. So Florida State has an opportunity to earn somewhere, 10 plus $15 million per year. Of course, they got to hold up their end of the deal to do that. So if they do, they can actually make enough money to bridge this gap for a couple of years. So I'm thinking Florida State, I don't think they're going to stay. I will say that. I think you're looking somewhere probably 27, 28 season, probably really feeling your options out here because, before the Big Ten and before the SEC come back to the negotiating table, I think you'd probably like to know whether you have Florida State in the fold or not, and maybe who else. So I think that's about the time you see them start to kind of push the door open. But I do think 2030, I think they're in a different conference. Eric, my heart kind of wants to be in the SEC. And the reason I say that is because I grew up in the South. I grew up, near Florida fans and Georgia fans. And there's like 5 SEC stadiums within a couple hours of my house where I live at. So from the regionality aspect and just the fun of that, I think I would personally like to be in the SEC. But then again, we don't really like the SEC at Florida State and the ESPN machine and all that. So it would be nice to kind of wash our hands of that a little bit. And I think it is the Big Ten. I really do. And this is something that hopefully I can get you on our show one day to talk about. I'd love to get your opinion on it as well. I think Florida State's looking for the Big Ten because of 2 reasons. I think one, you've seen where they've talked about trying to get their AAU status and things like that. They know it's down the road, but they're working towards it. They've done a lot with academics. They're investing in the facilities. I think they're aligning themselves to make the move to the Big Ten. And I think that's part of with Fox, and I think that's part of Fox creating that national conference. I think that's something else that Fox really would like to get that footprint down in the state of Florida, which is a massive market. And I think Florida State is the school to do that. And so does the SEC add in a defensive manner? We don't know. We'll have to wait and see. But I think it's probably going to be the Big Ten. And I think you're going to see it happen around the date they renegotiate because, as you know, they have the escalators. They don't have the pro rata clause. So Florida State would only get a partial membership. So maybe, once the math game makes sense because the buyout does come down every single year, to get out of the ACC. I think once the math makes sense, I think you see Florida State make a move for the Big Ten. And it'll be interesting, man. I love the
Yeah,
move. It's a national conference. There's a lot of fun teams in there. It just means a lot more travel.
it does. So a lot of people don't understand when it comes to the Big Ten, and so being somebody who's in up to my ears in
Right.
this talk with the Big Ten, AAU status is absolutely massive to this conference. A lot of people think, oh well, this is just about television deals and football, and it's not in the Big Ten. It absolutely is not. What a lot of people don't understand is that there is some serious big money in an AAU status when it comes to medical research.
Yep.
We're talking federal grant money that you're not going to get anyplace else. And these presidents do not want to do anything to hinder that money, that pipeline coming
Yeah.
in from the US government to aid in the medical research that is changing lives in this country. It means more to a lot more powerful people than whether you get a first down on 4th and 2 or not
Yeah. Yeah.
late in the game against whoever your opponent is. People who could care less about your football program or your swimming and diving or your fencing program or any of those things. And so the presidents in the Big Ten Conference are not going to let that AAU status go by the wayside for a television deal with said school from another conference joining in.
Yeah.
In fact, Nebraska, who had AAU status, no longer has AAU status. And I know for a fact that the other 17, well, it was before the 4 joined from the Pac 12, the other 13 presidents in the conference were very upset about that and were telling Nebraska, you better get it back.
Yeah. And the
So,
thing is, Florida State does have a president that comes from an academics background.
mm-hmm.
And so they have made a lot of strides in that area. They are planning on opening an acute care facility in the Panhandle. They're trying actually to. It sounds like they're ultimately trying to purchase the Tallahassee Memorial Health there in Tallahassee. So they're really pushing things towards that direction. They've stated in
Sounds
their
like it.
open plans that I found on their website where they hope to be AAU ready by 2027. So it does sound like they're working that way. But I think as long as they can do that, they can bring from the viewership and the football side of things. They can give the Big Ten that national conference. But I do think they can offer that in athletics and academics if they can get that AAU status. But they are working towards it. So we'll see. And, the thing I will say with realignment is, as you know, it does happen fast, but this is a long game in a lot of ways. And so people, I think, want it to happen overnight, but that's just not the way it works. And so I
Right.
think Florida State has a long-term plan, and I think the lawsuit was necessary to get to this long-term plan. And so I think they just did what's best for the future of the program in the university. And I do think that will be a future that ends up in the Big Ten.
2 more questions with that, and then we'll wrap this thing up. One fun one and then one serious one. So the
Okay.
fun one. Who would be coming with you if you were to go to the Big Ten, in your opinion?
Oh man, that's tough because, and please, Clemson fans, if you're watching this, don't take this as a shot. I don't think Clemson has the academics to get into the Big Ten. They're not AAU. They're a little bit farther down than Florida State. They do put in a good bit of money for research. I've heard that the SEC, if the kind of the foundation gets shaken of the ACC, that the SEC is probably going to want to come in and grab North Carolina and Virginia potentially. But then you have the weird things with some of these states is, does NC State have to come with UNC? Does Virginia Tech have to come with Virginia? So, actually, Eric, what I would hope would happen, and I know this kind of sounds strange, is I would hope it would be Miami.
Hmm.
And that's because they already, I believe, have AAU. So
They
they
do.
are a program
Hmm.
there. If they can continue to perform on the field and get back to kind of where they used to be, I think they can be a draw from the TV perspective. Now, yes, that's 2 Florida market teams, but then the Big Ten also inherits Florida State Miami rivalry, which would be huge for them. And so, man, I think a dark horse would be Miami. Although I kind of want, I don't know now, man. The lawsuit, the Big Ten has got their back on the lawsuit against Miami, so they might have just kind of blocked themselves there, but. Man, it's hard to say. I think one of the North Carolina schools or Virginia is probably the most likely, but from what I understand, the SEC really wants them. So I would just hate out of all this to lose either the Florida or the Miami rivalry. So I hope maybe we can bring somebody with us. So at least then that can become a conference game.
Okay. Now the not so fun question with this. Did all of this talk about leaving the ACC really affect 2024 season?
I really don't think so
It didn't have any
because
effect on the field, you
I
think?
I don't think so because
Okay.
other than Mike Norvell answering questions about it, I don't think the players truly cared that were already on the team whether they were at. Now, yes, I think you do have a little bit of the stigma that's been created where you have the power two and then you're in the ACC. So maybe you could say that that type of stuff has a little bit of talk with like on the recruiting trail or something. You're negatively recruited about playing in the ACC. But at the end of the day, I don't really think it made a whole lot of difference with the on field performance. I think it was just one of the things that, because from what the Board of Trustees said, this was something that was put into place long before that decision in 2023 was ever made to leave Florida State out. So I think this was something that was kind of coming down the road for a long time. And real quick, I'll say that like when you talk about the ACC, you have Florida and Florida State that play every year. You have South Carolina and Clemson that play every year. And then Georgia Tech has kind of gotten back where they're competing with Georgia again. But those three schools have a direct SEC competitor. They have to answer to their fan base and their, and their boosters and all that stuff why you can't keep up with a program that is making $50 million a year more than you in the SEC. And so I think that's why for Florida State and for Clemson, they were so hell bent on getting out of the ACC because they have that direct competitor. And so, yeah, I do think Florida State, at the end of the day, man, I think it's best to leave the ACC and it'll be best for the program. But I don't think I think it was just more noise during a time of a lot of noise. And goodness gracious, there was a lot wrong in last year. So, why not just add it to the pile?
Yeah. Okay. All right. I take a trip. I've been to Florida a couple times for work. I end up in Tallahassee, Florida in September, October, and I'm going to catch a Florida State game. And I'm not going to wear my Ohio State stuff because I don't want to get crucified there in Tallahassee. So I'm gonna grab my Florida State gear and I'm gonna walk into the stadium. And of course, I know this. Okay, I know how to do
Yeah.
this. But is there some other thing or saying or chant that Florida State fans have with each other so that I can fit in when I'm down there in Tallahassee?
Well, obviously you got the war chant down packed, and
Got
then
that.
the fight song. You don't have to know all of it, but there's a particular part where we go FLORIDASTATE, Florida State, Florida State, Florida State. Woo! And so
Okay.
that's a good one to know. There's also a few other chants that I can't share on this channel because we're family friendly that have something to do with our rivals in the state of Florida. We'll
Gotcha.
just leave those for off the show when you get in the stadium.
Well, I am from Ohio. We do know how
Yeah,
to spell our state. That is our thing. So,
exactly.
as people like to remind us, yeah, you can spell. I'm like, well, have you seen some of our neighbors? They can't.
Yeah,
So, we like
exactly.
to remind them of that.
That's
All
what
right.
makes
So,
college football fun, man.
yeah. All right. War chant and spelling the state out. I got you, buddy. I can do those things, man.
Yeah,
Jesse, tell everybody, maybe there's a Florida State fan, an ACC fan, somebody who stumbled on this. Maybe they're a fan of another school. They like what the content you brought. Tell everybody where they can find Plant the Spear at.
definitely, man. The place to start is our website, www.plantthespear.com. We have all of our videos there, our podcasts there. We have written articles there as well. We have a link to the College Huddle page there as well, so you can find it from there. We also are obviously here on YouTube at Plant the Spear. Follow us on X, or I still call it Twitter. Follow us on Twitter. That's probably where I'm the most active at Plant the Spear 1. We're on Facebook, Instagram as well. And of course, you can find us in the College Huddle. Excited for this upcoming season, man. We're going to be at ACC Media Days in late July. We got a ton of preseason content getting ready to roll out. We're covering all the recruiting that Florida State's been doing here over the last month. So, man, lots of content coming. Would love to have you guys part of the Plant the Spear family.
Awesome. Of course, if you can't find any of those, just go to thecollegehuddle.com. Scroll over to the ACC, drop down to Florida State. There you'll find the Plant the Spear page. It's got all the links to all of their social media, their website, YouTube, etc. We're always connected here at the College Huddle, and it's so fantastic to see the Plant the Spear guys and our Cavalier connection, and maybe some of our other Huddle members as well, getting to go to media days at the different locations. And so, College Huddle is legit, people. We are
Yes, sir.
growing this community. We like to tell everybody we're not a network, we are a community of podcasters, content creators, and people who are fans of the programs that we love so dearly. dearly, and we love to talk about them. And it was fantastic to talk about Florida State with you today, Jesse. Thank you so much, my man. I appreciate you coming in and being a part of the College Huddle. Until next time, everybody, you all know what to do. Is it Go State? Is that what you guys say? What do you guys do?
Go
What
Knowles.
Go Knowles.
Go
Go
Knowles. Yes,
Knowles.
sir. Go Knowles.